Be seated, please. Last week I was in New York for a meeting of the Board of Episcopal Relief and Development. As part of the celebration of the organization's 75th birthday, we also hosted there in New York a symposium with partners from around the globe, partners with Episcopal Relief and Development, and extraordinary work going on in many, many places. There were health service workers from Africa and Central America, climate-smart agricultural projects in Ghana, reliable efforts to stem the terror of sexual and gender-based violence in Kenya and Burundi. These are projects in partnership with ERD, projects primarily of and by and for the people who live in these communities. Anglican Christians are sisters and brothers with whom we partner to accomplish miraculous results, life-giving change for the good. The keynote speaker for the symposium was Jim Young Kim, the president of the World Bank Group. I never, ever dreamed I would be traveling in company like that. Among other things, Dr. Kim is something of a theologian. Who knew? Much influenced by liberation theology. I was not expecting to hear from the lips of the president of the World Bank the phrase, the preferential option for the poor. Dr. Kim reminded us that while the news around the world is full of tragedy, crisis, and challenge, it is also a time of remarkable progress and possibility. Real possibility of eliminating extreme poverty in most of the world. The UN Sustainable Development Goals commit the world to just that goal by the year 2030. And it is not a pipe dream. Challenge, but not a pipe dream. Here are some facts that almost never get reported. Since the 1990s, the number of extremely poor people in the world, depends who is counting, but that's usually counted to be people who earn less than $1 a day, who live on less than $1 a day. The number of extremely poor people in the world has plummeted, declining by 200 million over the last 3 years alone. In 1990, more than 12 million children died before the age of 5. This toll has since dropped by more than half. In the 1980s, get this one, in the 1980s, only half of girls in developing countries completed elementary school. Today, it's 80%. Even birth rates are affected by economic and social development, and they tend in the direction of sustainability. In 1985, Haitian women averaged 6 children. Today, that number is 3. In Bangladesh and Indonesia, the average is just over 2. When the poor know that their children will survive, when they educate their daughters, when they access family planning, they have fewer children. Now, the world remains a dangerous place. It hardly needs to be said after the last couple of weeks. Terrorism, domestic and global terrorism, threatens to undo us, doesn't it? Inequality abounds in this country. Climate change is creating increasingly volatile conditions, and we know that will only increase global displacement and various kinds of instability. I heard from Dr. Kim that the estimate is by the middle of the 21st century, as much as 40% of arable land in sub-Saharan Africa will be unproductive. Challenges. But the fact is, despite massive challenges, we have made remarkable, even miraculous progress in the direction of human flourishing, and we can continue to do so. God has not abandoned the creation. God has not abandoned us. Miracles Miracles are not absent from this world. This world. We've heard the stories of them from the women of Magdalene and Thistle Farms, haven't we? Death is real. Oh, who needs to be reminded of that? Whether suddenly from guns on the streets of our cities and our college campuses, in acts of terror or in wars around the globe, death can come suddenly. Or it can come demonically, slowly, from the curses of trafficking and addiction and discrimination and poverty. Death is real, and Jesus wept at its awful presence. Death is real, and so is resurrection. So is new life. So is hope. So is love. We see it in our presence here and now. And dear friends, there is nothing stronger than love. Never make the mistake of believing the devil's lies about that. Nothing is stronger than the self-giving love of the God who has loved us all into being in the first place. And as our new presiding bishop says, if it isn't about love, it isn't about God. Oh, that would become the refrain of the Episcopal Church. We're going to have a shot at that because Michael will not let us not make it the refrain. If it isn't about love, it is not about God. Resurrected love is real. It is true in our lives. I have seen it. Maybe you have too. We forget. God help us, we forget that we have seen it, but we have seen it. I have seen it. In addicted lives restored to wholeness one day at a time. In relationships restored, in friendships kindled across the boundaries of race and class and culture. I have seen it in families and in individuals. I have seen it in churches. I have seen it in this diocese. Churches that I thought were at death's door, suddenly experiencing new life and growth. Churches reaching out across their own boundaries to try to bridge the ugly chasms of racism. Churches that are thriving as they feed the hungry and house the homeless and give the hope of new life to people in their communities who have given up on ever finding it. Churches bearing faithful witness to the lavish love of God in the face of schism and exclusion. I have seen resurrection in our churches and in the people we serve. Have you? Tell me. Have you? Yes. Don't forget. Don't forget. And this doesn't just happen, does it? Resurrection made real like that does not just happen. It takes intention. It takes self-giving. It takes leadership. It takes leadership like Mary's. She was transparent to her grief, her loss, her apparent helplessness in the face of the brute facts. And she knew where to find hope and life and the love that reaches even through and beyond death. Lord, if you had been here, my brother would not have died. She knew to go to Jesus. It's where we need to go too. And that kind of leadership, transparent to the grief, transparent to the hopelessness, transparent to the brute facts, not denying any of them, but looking them straight in the eye, and then going to Jesus, that kind of leadership expands. It multiplies. Note that Jesus calls Lazarus out of the tomb, but he gives the work of unbinding Lazarus to those standing around. Namely, unbind him. Undo those windings, let him go. I have seen such unbinding. I have seen resurrection in our churches, and that's why I am so focused on trying to equip our congregations with the tools they need to make the way clear for the Spirit of God to move. Why I put so much emphasis on healthy leadership development, on identifying and encouraging leaders who will shape our conversations about what's right with our life together instead of what's wrong. Keeping our focus on the abundance of gifts God lavishes on us instead of obsessing about what is lacking. Too many people have given in to the very human tendency to accommodate death, to give up in its solemn presence. When John Danforth was in the diocese a couple of weeks ago, he was talking about the death of politics in this country. He said, when I was coming up through the ranks, politics meant the art of compromise. And he said, today, if you deviate an inch from the party line, you're out. And he said, too many of us have given up. Given up insisting that there is